guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone's doing good today. Today's Saturday, October the 28th, I think. And I wanted to throw a little story time on here before I get to work, because y'all already know I'm like siempre ando corriendo, and I hope it don't get too long, you guys. So a few days back I had done a little just throw like a little story time on my Instagram on and I think I even posted it here too. I posted it here too on just some like prison related stuff, and people were like, want to hear more on that, tanto en Instagram como aquí me dijeron. And I was like, that's true, I should go back to the story times, huh? Dang, there's so much to say. Like, I sat down and I was writing on it, and you know, I still have a hard time like going back and remembering, because it's been such a long time ago. It's been, I don't know, almost 20 years now. It's been a long time. And a lot of things you just like kind of black out, and then other things you try to go back and remember, not because of anything like too bad happening, but just because it was a very difficult time in my life, you know, especially when I was doing Fed time, when I had my baby in prison and all that. It was really hard. And even though the facilities were better than state, because I think I'm just gonna base this video on like state versus feds, and how different it is doing time on like a state prison versus a federal prison, at least, you know, in the state of Texas. So I'm gonna share a little bit on that. But for me, it was harder to do Fed time than it was to do state time, even though state is like, man, it's probably the worst time, honestly. And I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so let's start with TDC, since we're gonna do like a little comparison on, at least on how it was for me. TDCJ is the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and the state of Texas, of course. And its prisons, you guys, are very old and neglected. That's just really just basically what I can round it up to. There's not a lot of resources of anything. It's very, very like just hard time. It is. You know what? I even went back this week, and I just trying to see if maybe I could just get into like just remembering how it was in there. And one of the things that people are really like mad about right now, and it's been like an issue every single summer, is the fact that they don't have AC units in the state prisons, right? So the heat waves in Texas are really bad, and I think there was even like people passing out and passing away due to the heat. And the room temperature was like up to 120 something degrees, and it's been really bad. It's really bad for the prisoners.
The oppressive heat in Texas prisons is something that TDCJ has known about for decades, but especially as we see these record hot weeks this summer, we've seen increased concern and increased deaths in our Texas prisons. This week, I went through all of the custodial death reports from TDCJ from the beginning of the summer. There's been 60 of them just since June 1st. And out of those, almost a quarter are among young, otherwise healthy people under 40 years old. But we know that TDCJ has not reported a heat-related death officially since 2012. But because of the heat that we've seen in these cells, on these hot summer days, some of these cells reach internal temperatures of 120, 130. We know of at least one instance where the inside of a facility was 149 degrees.
One of the units that I did time in was in Dayton, Texas. If I'm not mistaken, it's a Plain State. It was Plain State Jail. I think that's what it's called. And we had like big pods, and I think there was like 63, 68 women in one pod. So you can imagine, y'all, the fights were so bad, because I mean, put 68 criminals, right? Rowdy criminals, violent crimes, murders, and most of us youngsters were doing aggravated, like we were in there for aggravated cases, like aggravated robbery, aggravated assault, like beating up on people, police officers, or just whatever, right? And other women were in there for like manslaughter. So you have all these like rowdy people, because that's something that, you know what, I once I was writing this down, like the verses, state prison has a lot more like rowdy women than the feds do, because in Fed time you have like women that are doing a lot more time for bigger, like more sophisticated crimes. I don't know if this is gonna make sense, but you had women that were like drug dealers doing like big things, you know what I mean, like that, or women that were like scamming people for like big amounts of money, or so these women came from a different background than you did with the women in the state. State cases has a lot of like like assaults or like robbery cases, or even manslaughters. Like I remember this one chick, two of them. One of them like literally ran over her husband, and she would tell you how she would like go about it, like how she went about it. And I mean, most of the women in there are pretty honest about what they do. Like they don't. I mean, what else do you do, especially in TDC? Like there's not much to do, which is something that I was like looking back on. There's really not anything. I mean, but like playing cards, reading, writing, fighting. That's really just all you do. You're so very limited. Like you're so very limited. I think I've mentioned this in like other videos, but like even when you walk through, I don't know, like the rec yard or something, or not the rec yard, but like to get from one place to another, you have to walk with your hands behind your back, like you can't just freely walk somewhere. You have to walk in a line. Like there's lines, right? Like there's, you know what I mean? Like there's lines literally like that you have to walk through. You can't step out of that line, and you'll catch cases for just about anything, like just about anything, man. Yeah, like they'll add a time to your sentence for just dumb things, and the guards are just a lot more savage in there too. The food is just terrible. Like when you wake up for chow, when they wake you up to eat, it'll be like at 3 o'clock in the morning to eat breakfast. Like who does that? Not even, I mean, the feds would never. At least again, in the Fed time where I was incarcerated was in Carswell unit in Fort Worth, Texas, and it was a medical facility, and they had like regular inmates like myself, and then they had like a medical unit for like the elderly and those prisoners that were doing just they were just ill for whatever reason. There was a lot of like cancer patients and just different situations like that. It's just you'll see a lot of cases like that where people are really sick, and it's just different. The facilities are just different. But out here it's really hard time. It really is in TDC. So in TDC you don't really have like green spaces at all like you would in the feds. There's really just concrete, and like sometimes, like especially if you're like in a maximum facility, or you're not really just trusted. I think they go by like degrees of something, right? I don't even remember what it's called, but I think it's like, I'm gonna look it up and I'm gonna see if I put it on here. I'm gonna see what it's called, but they have like different levels, like where they house you, right? According to, I don't even know according to what, right? But I guess the bigger the crime, the more like locked up in a way you are. And they'll probably come out of their cell like 1 hour out of the whole day, and even then you'll be like put in this cage. So it's just really bad. Like it's not really rec time. It's not any of that. Like they throw you out there to catch air, but that's really it, So I did 2 years, right? I got a 2-year sentence, and I did probably like 8 months. And then that's the thing about the state though, at least here in Texas, you won't do your whole time. Like you get a lot of like, what's that, man? I there's a term to this and I completely forgot because it's been so many years, but I think it's good time or something like that, right? Where you'll get like I don't know, 5 years or 2 or 10, and if you don't catch cases and you do good, like you'll be released way before those 10 or 2 or 5. So let's say out of the 2 years that I got, you only do like 6 months, and then the rest, you get released, and you'll parole out or whatever, which is kind of a trap though, because you not doing, like, man, they know that most of us are gonna get out. It wasn't it was my case in a different way, but most people get out and they don't do well. Like they'll get caught up while they're still on parole, because the expectancies of a parolee, I think that's the word for it, are so high. And you haven't really even rehabilitated, like no te has rehabilitado like enough to where you can be okay out here in the free world. Like you're gonna mess up, you're gonna get into trouble, you're gonna you really, I mean, they throw you out, and sometimes to like halfway houses, if I'm not mistaken. And then what do you have in there? A whole bunch of criminals that probably just even learned more crimes because all you did in there was nothing, because the state doesn't really give you anything to do. I mean, I wasn't doing hard time in like a bigger unit, like maybe let's say Hobby or Gatesville or something like that, where maybe I'm sure that they have like more programs, but even then it's so very limited. Like they don't invest at all into inmates like moving forward. Hopefully I'm wrong, and now 20 years later they've stepped their game up, but from what I'm seeing in the news, it's nothing like that. Like women, and even more so men, right, are still stuck with just really just being the same people after they get out. I mean, the only thing that you have is like, I don't know, maybe the religious side where they'll, but I mean, that really ain't, I mean, I'm not gonna say nothing. That's a lot, yeah, like to the soul, but you need, I mean, realistically, you need resources, you know what I mean? That's like on the spiritual end. I'm talking like, how are you gonna get out there and like have some job skills, you know? How do you start over? How do you start a brand new life over? Like, it's hard, you know, it's hard for a lot of these, you know, inmates. So they obviously end up going back to their old ways, and then they end up going back to prison, and it's almost like a setup. It's like almost like they want you to go back by the way that they don't help you, not in there or when you know, get released. So it's just a vicious cycle. I knew so many women in there. Going back to the crimes that you see in TDC, there's a lot of like prostitution cases, a lot of, you know, drug addicts. That's one of the, man, that's something that you're gonna see a lot. Like you'll have women in there that had really severe drug addictions, and that took them to, you know, prostitute themselves and other things, right? So it's just, it's sad. You run into a lot of sad cases, you know, women that were doing a lot of time because, you know, their men were out there dealing and they happen to get caught up, which is kind of like what happened to me, right? Like your man's out there doing bad things, and then you end up getting caught up with them, because especially if there's kids involved, like if they have kids, and you know that a lot of these women, men, they come from broken homes. It's all a cycle, like it really is. And it's just sad to see that lives don't get better upon release. They don't, and they need a lot more help. And that's just all I'm gonna say on that. I could go on forever about this because it's truly unfortunate. I got to see girls in there. I was so young. I was 17 when I was doing time, which is in the state of Texas, it's legal. Like once you're 17, you're gonna be tried as an adult. And this is one of the reasons why I stayed just like worried about even my own son. Like when I allowed him to go back and, you know, do his high school years like out there with my dad or whatever, I'm always like, Mark, like, listen, like the state of Texas will not give a damn. They'll try you as an adult. Like, please be careful out there, because it's such a complicated, just very vulnerable age where you can get caught up. Like, todo se te hace fácil. You think everything's just, you know, I mean, you're a kid. You really are a kid. Like, now that I look back, I'm not even gonna say, even though the place was just very bad, it was like, I say this, like very Green Mile, you know, like that movie, like just old. Like you go in there and that feel of just you're locked away and forgotten type of ish. Like it's just so bad. Everything's so like secluded, and I don't know, it's just so bad in there. And hoy un pajarito. I love birds, you guys. Y es como si me estuvieran cantando aquí en la ventana. Gracias, Señor, por mi libertad. Thank you, Jesus, for my freedom. You guys, I say this all the time. Man, if you see me making, like, especially on Facebook, sometimes I'll just randomly wake up just grateful to God that I'm free. You guys don't even understand. Like, if you have freedom today, right now, man, I know that there's probably people that are watching this in prison too, because people like they'll sneak phones in there now. Back then we didn't have phones like that, you know, back in the day. But man, look, man, freedom is everything. And if you're listening to me right now, you're locked up, know it gets better. Please know it gets better. You're gonna get out, and life, you're gonna put all this behind. You're not even gonna remember it. Just write it out one day at a time. Please, like, please know that it gets better. And you know what, even if you don't have these resources or you don't know how to break free from these cycles, one, know God is with you, because that's really just what helped me. There's so much trauma and PTSD and just bad, even like just perceptions of life and people and things that happen once you get released, and it's hard for you to go back to a regular normal job and do things the right way, especially if you're out there like dealing or whatever. It wasn't my situation, but for many, again, going back to this, a lot of the girls that were doing time, that's all they'd ever known. Their parents had been dealers, they married or got with dudes that were dealing as well, you know, and then their kids ended up like, it's just a cycle, it's a way of living. And you know, you can break free from that, you really can. It's gonna cost you like a whole bunch. It's gonna be hard, but it's possible. And that piece of just being free and not owe the state anything, man, I think now I would probably, that's one thing that I appreciated from the feds. Like the feds, I mean, you'll do all your time, you'll get like what, 1 or 2 months like off your sentence or whatever, but you're gonna do your maximum time. And in a way, man, pay your dues and then get out and not owe the state anything, because it's a trap, in my opinion. I had a friend, you guys, that I seen, man, I don't even know how. We don't even have any like friends in common, but Facebook recommend, like, you know how like it'll like recommend like friends or whatever, like it'll post like certain people you can add them. And this girl, right, from back in those days in TDC, I was like, oh my gosh, is this homegirl from like when we were locked up, you know? And she was in there for, I think she was a dancer, so I'm sure she had like, you know, like prostitution cases that they had like added up, and she was there for that. And I contacted her, and she was like, oh my God, you know, and we kind of just started like going back and forth talking. And that was literally this week, de verdad. O sea, yo no sé, yo creo que Dios, ya no sé qué onda. A lo mejor porque he estado hablando tanto de esto, no sé qué onda, pero, y she was like, man, she's like, it didn't go good for me. She's like, you know, she just got a 10-year sentence, and she was able to, I think she did some time, and then she was released on parole, and now she owes the state like 6 years or something. Man, she's like, this is just like, it's just hard out here. Like they really will just, man, especially like the parole officers, they're not always fair, you know. And if you have all this going on, you know, all this, your mentality, and you still don't know how to really deal with anxiety, deal with depression and this and that, you're gonna go to drugs. You're gonna go back to using. And once you go back to use, plus, I mean, honestly, if that's all you've ever known, even the people that try to help you out, like once you get released, they're probably doing bad things themselves, you know. So you're gonna be around all of that again, the environment, the people, like the drug, everything. So I mean, of course you're gonna be tempted, you're gonna go back if that's the only way that you know how to deal with life, you know. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking like, yeah, well, I mean, it's all about making a decision. And it's true. You do have to make a decision, but you also need help. You do need help. And man, honestly, that's probably going to be on my list. Like I always pray for prisoners, but seriously, like I pray that, you know, people get the help that they truly need, because I know that there's a lot of people in there. I met a lot of women that really wanted to do right. And some of them did. I do have a friend added on here on one of my, I think she's probably on all my social media accounts. She is. And I've posted pictures of her here too. We did time in the feds together. And she got out and she did really good. She was able to get her kids back, do a career and something. She did something, but she's like, man, she's like, I got to do something with myself. And she probably had help too. Like you have to have somebody that cares. And if you don't, I pray today that God sends you an angel that helps you, that guides you. Because, you know, it's so important that we break that cycle. You know what I mean? I hope that I can show you that. Even though I'm like in a whole other country and, you know, I'm out here, like it's completely probably different. Maybe your situation and mine is not the same. But listen, you know, I was able to get out and overcome these things. This is why I'm always jumping on here and still being vulnerable. Like I'm still struggling with this, because even like I said in my last video, I think it was the Spanish one, you can leave the life, but the life is gonna have a hard time leaving you. The same way that you handle things in the past, you're gonna want to handle it later. Even if You say, oh, I'm gonna leave all that behind. That's in the past. I mean, yeah, I know. I mean, because at the same time, it's like you still have to change your way of thinking. You have to believe in yourself. You have to forgive yourself, because many times, man, I was stuck in the past for years too. I mean, I can tell you just barely, like, I don't know, 5, 6 years back, I done forgave myself, So it's a whole process, you know what I mean? Y'all, with the feds, getting to the Fed time, I know I mentioned some things on my TDC time, but going back to the feds, I remember when I got caught up the second time and I did more time, right? Y'all know my story. Many of you know my story. When I was after TDC, I got an INS hold, and I wasn't even released, like, out, because I paroled out of TDC, but I was handed over to ICE because, I mean, they took my papers and I had to resign and all of that, and they took me to an ICE facility. Many, not one, many. I was like in 4 or 5. I don't even remember. I went through like the whole state of Texas, y'all. And before getting released too from like the plain state, they'll take you like in your prison bus.
In the East Ride ATVs with Mac 11s. First off, you better remember what that sign say before you come down here to this bitch. Don't mess with Texas. Cause you know everybody around this bitch got guns, nigga. Hey, see, I'm from Texas.
I think it was, I don't know if we passed through Hobby and then Gatesville, or I think it was just Gatesville, but I think everybody has to go through Gatesville so you can be released. It's like the main prison or something. I don't know if it's like the headquarters, or I don't even know, but we all had a parole out of there. And then once I did, ICE was waiting for me. They picked me up, and then they took me to like a whole another 1, 2, 3, I don't even know how many facilities. Like they were just moving me around all the time. And I think it was probably even worse doing time in the ICE facilities than it was in the state, in the state jail, because it was a prison, right? But because my sentence was so short, they like divided it. They divided the state side, the people that were doing like state time versus like the TDCJ, like the prison time. And all of us that were on the like on the prison side, we were all not there like permanently. Like we're all gonna be transferred to like the bigger pens, right? But I didn't get to go to the bigger pens because I had a very short sentence, gracias a Dios. So I ended up like doing time with ICE, and that was just a whole terrible experience. I finally got deported at 2 o'clock in the morning. That I've shared this too on one of the videos. I don't remember which one. It was a long time ago, but yes, you get deported back then at 2 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, or just I was just blessed enough that it was in my own hometown here in Laredo, both times that I was deported. So I came back, you already know, like a few months, and then no aguante aquí because I had never lived here, even though I would come every summer and like see my family. It was just not the same as living here at all. I mean, at all. I mean, you'll do like a week here, you're fine, but then you already know, if you visit Mexico, you know how it is. Like, well, not anymore. Now that you have made a whole life for myself out here, and life is completely different than when I used to come and visit my grandma, but it was really hard, and it was too much for me, and I went back and I was already pregnant with Mark. And as all of you know, I happened to get caught up again at the checkpoint. Everything happened, I got incarcerated again. And I knew that because I had gotten like a lifetime ban, I was facing like up to 20 years because of my previous charges with the state, right? So they take all that into account con el tabulador para poderte sentenciar. There's like this, I don't even know, like there's this, somebody even mentioned this in one of the very first videos that I did. She's like, yeah, girl, she's like, I remember that they called it the something, right? So it goes by levels, and they don't sentence you to years, they sentence you to like months in the feds. And as soon as at first they'll throw you to the little counties, I went straight to Encinal after we got caught up that second time. And I went straight to Encinal, Texas, and then I did a little bit of time there. Thank God they moved me. Ooh, y'all, I got a lot to say on this, but I got to keep it short. But thank God they moved me to Falfurrias, and I did most of my time in Falfurrias. I waited 13 months to get sentenced the second time, but it was very different. It was very different. Because it was better than the county, like Harris, especially Harris County. Y'all, Harris County is so bad, you guys. I think I probably seen more like just the way the treatment is just so bad. Oh, there's like horror stories to this. which I probably won't be able to get to all of them right now, but we could do a specific one just on that. But you pretty much basically get used to just being stripped down all the time. You know what? In all prisons will strip you down. I've probably seen, I'm a nurse, so I've seen a whole lot of naked women because I've been in a lot of births. And now, right, I mean, whole new life, going back to, you can start over and have a better life. And I've done a lot of pap smears. Like, I'm very acquainted, like, with women's bodies. But I think even more, before I was a nurse, I've probably seen more naked women, y'all, than I'd ever in my life. Like, hundreds. Sometimes they were, like, strippers all down in a gym. I remember in Harris County, it was, like, a big type of gym, or I don't know, this place, right? And we'd all be naked, like, bend over, like, squat, and, like, spread your cheeks type of stuff. Like, it's like that. It's really like that. Like, for visitation, it's like that. In TDC, it was like they had to strip you down, you know, and it's like you kind of get used to it. You know, you kind of get used to it. And in the feds, it was like this too, you know. It was less of that, but it was still bad. Like, the county was still bad. The time was still a hard time. Because I was pregnant this time, it was a lot harder for me. Like, a lot harder for me. When I finally got sentenced, I think I shared more on that specifically in the video, my second prison story time. I think it's called I Had My Baby in Prison or something. And I think I was a lot more detailed on how it went in there for me. But it was really hard. It really was. And when I finally got sentenced, I thank God that day that I was finally sentenced. They moved me from Falfurrias, Texas to San Antonio. We all had to go through San Antonio. It was like this county jail before you get transferred to like your prison, right? Wherever it is that you're going to be located. I was blessed enough to stay in the state of Texas, not that far from my family, because Dallas is probably like a few hours from Houston. And a lot of the girls that I was incarcerated with, like, originally, they were transferred out of Texas, Oklahoma, and like Virginia, and like other places. Some of them went all the way up to New York, you know. So there was just no way of seeing your family. And I was having like regular visitations, you know. I got to hold my son until he was 6 months after I had him. And it was just really hard time. I remember when I first arrived to like the prison after San Antonio. I think I stayed in San Antonio like a week. And then once I got to the feds, I remember it was just like a whole nother world. I got there right on Christmas. I think it was right on Christmas, like a day or two before Christmas. And the girls that I pulled chain with, they were from Laredo, Texas. One of them had a previous manslaughter case, but somehow it got situated, and she was like a really good friend of mine. I know this sounds probably really odd to you. This probably sounds really odd to you. Like, girl, how could you make really good friends with a girl that was that violent? But, you know, a lot of these women that commit these crimes, they're not, okay, y'all probably gonna sound delusional now, but they're not bad people. They just get caught up in really bad situations. And we don't all come from the same background. Not everybody's blessed enough to come from a good family. You have a lot of these patterns passed down to you from mom, dad, probably grandma, neglect. If nobody was there, like, the streets raised you. And by the time they realize, like, the enemy is really vicious, y'all. The enemy will make sure that we fall into these traps. He'll blind us into so many things. And you see that a lot. People wake up to their realities once you're in there, once you're sober, and you're like, damn, like, what did I do? You know, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of just repentance going on, and it's real, you know. So anyways, this time she was in there for something else. I don't remember. There was a lot of the girls that were from the border were in there for drug cases, of course, smuggling. One of the other really good friends that I had in there was, she had used her baby's car seat to like smuggle in, like, I think it was like 2 kilos of like coke or something. And they of course took her baby away, and she lost her kids. And you know, she was a single mom. She was struggling with the dad. So I mean, se le hizo fácil, like she thought it was gonna be like easier or whatever to just, I don't know, she got caught up, you know, and she was doing hard time in there because, you know, she had kids. So, you know, there's a lot of this, you know, that goes on. And anyways, when we all pulled chain, we kind of just stayed close, you know, and man, I remember, you know, it was Christmases were hard. Thank goodness, I'll never forget, like when you first arrive, right, you come from different counties, and then they'll probably like keep you like in this like I don't know, like in certain like cells before you're released out to your dorm. And man, I was praying, please, please let it be before Christmas, because, you know, while you're sitting there waiting for you to get processed in, you're not going to get to call your family members or anything, you know. And when they finally like released us out into like our dorms where we're going to be housed, man, it was just like a whole nother world. I was like, oh my God. I remember, I'll never forget, like they opened like the doors to where we're at, and there was no guard waiting for us, like in the States or even the counties, right? Because even the counties, like you'll have guards like walking you through like the whole, you know, facility. And out here they were like, nah, go ahead, you know, just find your dorm. And we're like, what, you're not gonna guide me there? Like, you're not, like, I'm free? Like, this girl passed by, I'll never forget it. She was like, are y'all lost? She was like, why are y'all just standing there? And we're like, we don't know where to go. And she's like, girl, you free? Like, what are you doing? Just get to your, like, you're fine. You can walk through the whole thing. Like, you're fine. And we're like, for real? Like, there's no line, so we gotta walk through? Like, what? You know, there's nobody gonna guide me anywhere. And we were like, okay, we're carrying our little mesh bags or whatever, you know, right? And like with them ugly like shoes, like when you first get like processed in, like you'll get like certain clothes that's just different to everybody else's, right? So we're kind of like getting to our dorm or whatever and trying to see where we're gonna be housed. And you know, it was like there was just this big park, like this area. I was like, what in the world is this, right? I was like, feds got money for real. Feds for real got it going on. And you feel this sense of freedom. Like you feel this sense of freedom of being able to just freely just do whatever you want, you know? And I remember we finally get to where we're supposed to be, the dorms. It was like a big like apartment complex type of thing. And there weren't any cells. It was like this huge dorm. You had like hundreds of women in there, but everybody had their room, you know. And there was like bunk beds, but there were real beds and like pillows and like real pillows and like kind of like casi like almost real blankets. And I was like, what? They had like real tennis shoes, like from the free, like they would sell their own like tennis shoes, right? But I mean, I'm like big on tennis shoes, right? So I was like seeing certain sneakers. I was like, well, we got all this in here. Like what? They had like different TV rooms. They had like 4 TV rooms, and there was like the Spanish channel, and then like the sports channel, and then like the English channel, and then like the something else. And there was a laundry room. You could iron in there, and you know, it was crazy. It was very free world type of thing, you know. And then finally they were like, okay, well, you know, it's y'all can, like, the cafeteria is now open, like y'all can go, you know, go get something to eat. And we're like, okay. I mean, and you would see a lot of people not even go. There was microwaves and like hot showers, and we were like, what? Like, what is this? They had a beauty salon. They had like this like computer area too, where people would like email. And I mean, everything was limited, of course, but man, when I tell you, TDC would never, like state prison would never, ever. People here were just a lot more relaxed. The type of people that you would see in there was different. Yeah, there was like violent women. There's always going to be violent women everywhere, you know, state or feds. But the type of women that you would see in there were just different. Like there was a lot of fancy like women in there, you know. You could just see they were doing hard time. Like, I mean, not hard time, but like, well, yeah, I mean like long sentences, lifers. And I remember this mom and like daughter, right? They were doing a life sentence because the mom somehow convinced the daughter to marry this wealthy man for money, and they killed him so they could like charge the insurance money, right? And they got the money, but then they eventually got caught up, you know. And they were in there for that. And there was a lot more Native women in there, like a lot more than we had in the feds in the state. I think it's because they were transferred in from like New Mexico and like Arizona, like more of the where they had like the reservations, I think they're called. And I got to make a lot of good friends. Actually, one of the pictures that I posted on here, one of the girls, really good friends that I had in there, she was Native. And you just make a lot of good friends. I know it sounds really odd, but you really just hold it down together. You know what I mean? And it was just a blessing in disguise, because you really learn a lot from, you know, all walks of life, and you see a lot of things. And for me, it was hard time though, in the sense that, you know, I was away from my son, and even though I was a mom, it still wasn't as hard because I had never bonded with my son before. I would just get to see him, you know, when they would bring him down, and I was lucky enough to have that. You know, a lot of women don't. I think the hardest time, the most exciting part of the day when you're doing time is like when it's mail time, 4 o'clock, and you know, you see them come in with like a lot of mail. Everybody's just kind of waiting, you know, to see new pictures from their kids. Or sometimes it's the worst part of the day because they've been completely forgotten, you know. And you see just a whole lot. I don't think there's a whole lot more to say on this, y'all, and I gotta cut this short. But it was definitely harder time for me, even though we had all these resources. And the feds is just a lot better about, you know, helping women do better once they're released. You know, they even have like different churches, you know, depending on, they cater or tend to like every religion. Again, going back to like the natives, they had their own, you know, rituals or whatever it is that they, you know, did, their beliefs. Like they really prioritized, you know, them in many ways, you know. And then like the Christian church, and then the Catholic church. And I was blessed enough to work at the chaplain's office thanks to this woman that she was doing a long time. She was Hispanic, and there was a situation where they were messing around with the priest, y'all. And dang, should I say it? Well, I'm not gonna say their names, right? And they got mad at each other. Something happened, right, with the chicks, right? And she managed to get the other girl fired. And she's like, listen, she's like, I know you're Christian. She's like, but do you want to work at the chaplain's office? She's like, because I need somebody that I can trust, you know. And I was so young, and I was like, sure. And I was blessed because when you go in there, I mean, you get like jobs like the kitchen, right? Or like the jobs that nobody wants. And then eventually you'll just work yourself up to a better job. The operators, y'all, the operators that people call up, like they're inmates. And, you know, they all work there. A lot of these women that they had the privilege, you know, to work because you get paid. Like you'll get real money, you know. They would even send home to their kids sometimes. Like they would because there was more motivation to do good and more better jobs and more resources and more of a lot of everything. Women were able to do better. Some of them were, you know, able to send money home. It wasn't a lot, but they would, you know, they would help their kids somehow. And they would even take care of themselves, because once you're in there, especially if you're doing a long time, you know, people are not going to send you money, you know. So women were just doing better than like the state. I mean, out there, you not only do you not get paid, but you're out there like working the fields, like the whole squad.
Pues ahí te levantas y es a huevo, pues a lo que ellos dicen, ¿verdad? Es te ponen a este tiempo esto, a este tiempo esto y a este tiempo el otro, ¿verdad? Te ponen a jalar. Sí, te ponen a jalar. Es nomás acá. Yo batallaba mucho para eso cuando te querían, que a la hora de jalar a las 4 de la mañana tenías que estar arriba y a jalar en los campos. Nosotros cosechábamos de todo ahí, de todo. Aprendí a plantar semilla de todo y todo eso.
Entonces te pueden jalar bien. Sí, pero...
La papa era una chinga.
Una chinga las papas.
If I'm not mistaken, that's what they call it out there, like pico y pala and everything. It was bad. And the hot sun, like straight, they treated us like straight slaves, you guys. They did. They really did. Like they'll have you out there, they'll work your back. And they don't give a damn, especially in Texas, the freaking riding around like casi like con el látigo. It's just so bad. Women in there have it really hard. Like, my heart really goes out to everybody doing time and like in the state. But feds is definitely different. It's a whole nother vibe. Thank goodness, you know, I did like 24 months of that, and I was released again. And this is when, you know, I decided to stay. I was reunited with my son, and things were still not easy after release. My first year here in Mexico, 2008 has been the hardest year that I've ever faced in my life, even more than doing prison time. Oye, las tortillas. It was really, really hard time, but we managed to pull through, and we're here today. And I try to just go through this, probably a really long video, but I try to go like briefly through some of the differences. But you can survive these things, and you can get out and have a better life. And I wanted to get to how you survive in there, but like survival mode and how people manage to survive in like the different places. But it's so long. We're gonna do a part 2 on this. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys have a blessed day. I'm gonna get to class because I have to be there in like 5 minutes. But I pray, if you're listening to this, I just want you to know that it gets better. Even if you're doing time right now, know that there's like a lovely, wonderful life waiting for you in the outs. And, you know, God is with you, and He's going to guide you and help you. And I pray that God puts the right people in your life to help you get to where you need to be and make a better life for yourself and your kids. It's definitely possible. There's going to be a lot of work, a lot of triggering, a lot of temptations upon release, but you know, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. So you guys have a blessed day, and I'll be back soon, you guys. Thank you for listening and staying all the way to the end. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and week. Bye.